All right, I say it every time, but I love that intro music gets me pumped up to talk recovery every freaking single time. I don't know if I'll ever change it. I am Scott. I am the Sober Heathen. This is the Sober Heathen podcast. Dude, super excited again today for another great interview. Had a great one with Jim yesterday. If you haven't found that, haven't got a chance to listen to that, make sure you give Jim a listen. It was a great conversation. Brought so much energy yesterday. Today, I got Chris. This I do my best. I want to get to know people before bringing them on the podcast to make sure they're not psychos. And I haven't had a psycho yet, so I'm really not worried about it. But just looking through his Twitter feed and what he sent me, super excited to talk to Chris today and have him tell his story. Chris, welcome to the podcast, man. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your experience, strength, and hope.
I appreciate you too, Scott, and thank you for creating a space for people to share. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things that we can do today is use our unique backgrounds and whatever story exists there to help, end the stigma, end the shame, because shame kills,
Absolutely. That stigma, dude, it's finally, I feel like alcoholism is coming around a little bit, but folks on the other side of it, the NA crowd, I've had a couple people, one dude in particular who's struggling to find like-minded people. And we got to rid the stigma, man. We're not bad people. We've done bad things, but this disease is a killer, and it's warping. So, man, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Whatever you're willing to share, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Just finishing that, piggybacking on your thought you just said. We're not bad people trying to get good.
Sure.
I've always said that we're sick people trying to get well.
Amen.
And if we can find the inclusiveness that exists in the recovery community, we're no longer living on an island of one. We're part of this great. I mean, it's a team. I mean, they're in the recovery community. You don't have to look very far for help on any situation, scenario, problem, challenge. There's someone that has overcome it. Someone has experienced loss and survived sober through those things. Someone has experienced promotions, so I mean, I was drinking on any day that ended in Y, and there didn't have to be a bad day or a good day. It was just the way it was. And survival, I talk about my drinking and using career being in three phases. Fun was the first phase. Fun with problems was the second phase, and then just problems, and the fun stage was probably the briefest, because then my story is just a quick spiral out of control. I got, drunk and high when I was 15 for the first time on the same night. I was doing whatever was in front of me, and then I was taken over. It didn't take very long. I was like dry kindling, and all it took was that spark. And then I was just out there. But no, I appreciate you and what you're doing here with the Sober Heathen podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. And I really like how you put that, the three phases. That's absolutely what happened to me. It was fun. It made me something that I've always wanted to be. Outgoing. I could talk to women. I felt funnier. I felt smarter. I felt cooler. I mean, it gave me all those things. And then you're absolutely right. It was still fun for a while, but there started to be issues, friendships lost, relationships lost. And then yeah, it absolutely ends up to be just a complete shit show at the end of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think for what we're doing today, if you're okay with this, I like more of a just discussion and what we're like topics. Like let's just talk about things, and I'll throw my story and you throw yours in too.
Hell yeah.
Because I think that, in today's day and age, with social media, there's just so much right in front of us, and it's easy for people early in recovery that I see to get lost in that shuffle, and to even in a group full of people feel isolated, especially online. It's easy to become isolated online, and one of the things that I did with another sober person during the pandemic, you know, we started something called the recovery clinic. It's no longer around, but we did that because everyone was isolated, and that's so devastating and dangerous for people in recovery, especially me. I mean, I've been sober for 15 and a half years, but going through the pandemic, it still was an impact on me, you know, and
Sure.
I feel like I have a pretty good foundation. And so we started that clinic to be able to have reach into people's homes. And I don't know if you probably have been sent messages that sometimes, because of the Sober Heathen podcast, someone was able to have some hope and be inspired that they can survive the rest of the day,
Yeah.
because they were able to hear, because we were hearing people that were like in really bad situations, like in the dope house, and they would go into a closet and listen to the recovery clinic because that's the only way they could find that peace and hope, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And my mailbox in the last couple of weeks is just mailbox DM, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Some of the things that people are just sharing, just without even knowing me is, I mean, to have people just willing to do that, and maybe, I'm not going to sit here and say it's me. People just need to get it out. And, when I open the door for people to share that, that's and little things like that. You're absolutely right, man. Just sometimes people just need to talk. And this recovery community on Twitter, I cannot say enough about it, dude. It's just, it's crazy. I've been in both worlds of the Twitter spectrum. When I got into Twitter, it was because of politics. And
Yeah.
holy crap, what a crap show that was on that, dude. I never felt better leaving Twitter at the end of the night, putting my phone down. So I switched the account, and I got into recovery. That was during the dark days anyway for me. But getting into recovery, like the hashtags and things that are out there, yeah, it's you know, uh, just having a little bit of hope. So 15 and a half years of recovery, that's a remarkable amount of time. I've made this podcast and I've tried to get it out there that I don't care if you have a week. If you want to come on and talk about how you got to a week, I think that is just as important as long-term recovery, because that person with 6 days don't know if they can get to 7 days. That person with 7 days can tell how they did it. You know what I mean? And so I want a voice for everybody. But so 15 and a half years ago, sometimes it's hard to pinpoint what really happened and what turned the corner for you. Do you have any idea what that was? Do you have any idea what said, okay, you know what? I'm taking this and I'm going this way instead of this way today?
Absolutely. You know, I had been, I went to treatment when I was 20 years old and 40 now. And so when I went to treatment, I was exposed for the first time in my life to a new way of living that I could relate to, because my parents and the community coaches in high school and friends were trying to give me suggestions on a different way to live, but I couldn't ever hear that. I mean, God himself could have been with a loudspeaker saying, "Here's the way," and just internally, I couldn't get there, and
Yep.
I had to just be beat down enough and become sick and tired of being sick and tired. We've heard that before.
Yep.
And so there's a whole bunch of things that, looking back on, just one instance could or should have changed my course, right?
Yep.
And this is why it was an addiction. I was driven by an obsession and a compulsion to use and put things into my body that coupled with an intense, insurmountable craving that I could never overcome. And so my first arrest, I ended up being arrested 14 times in 1 year, all alcohol related. Most people after that first arrest would be like, "Man, I got to look at this. That was embarrassing and humiliating. I don't want to do that anymore."
Yeah.
I did that in 1 year, 14 times in 1 year. My mom used to say we went to court like we went to the grocery store, you know?
Yep.
And she my own mother said that I was an over underachiever. You know, I really knew how to lose when I would put my head down and grinded it out. So my story isn't like, hey Scott, you came to me and said you really cared about me and that I should really look at my drinking and the consequences that are happening. I would have cut you off and don't get in the way of my drinking, you know?
Yeah.
and you know, I would have defended that right. And so I look back and it was kind of a culmination. It wasn't the overdose that I survived. It wasn't those arrests. It wasn't the jobs I lost. It wasn't the relationships that meant a lot to me that were ended because of my addiction. I just woke up one morning and it was like, you know, I've been selling the same story and no one was buying it. Every bridge that I had crossed was burned and I didn't have any more people to blame. And when I looked around, it was kind of like I had this, it was kind of like I had this surveillance tape, this footage of my whole addiction. And I was able to see it for the first time, you know, like I push over the first domino every time. And me blaming and me being a victim to any circumstance that just didn't exist anymore. I was out of that denial and I could see it. And it was stark, man. There was a lot of wreckage, you know, and,
Sure.
but I'm grateful that I was able to finally see that because, you know, you ask, can I pinpoint anything that really made a difference? It wasn't those big things. It was just, I was done running, you know, I had the right ass kicking, you know,
Right.
of that night before, just the right ass kicking. And then I woke up and I was like, okay, you know, and that was November 19th, 2007.
Awesome. Yeah. I like to ask that question, and it's almost the same every time that I ask it. It's not really one thing because consequences don't do shit. I mean, for me, it was OWI number 4, and my trying to recap my thought process. I just spent 220 days in treatment. I got a job working at treatment, and I was living in sober living, and my time ran out, and so I was living in my truck. And my thought process was, you know what? I'm just going to drink them all by myself. Nobody's going to know. I'm just going to enjoy it one more time, and then I'm going to go back to work. And I never went back to work. You know, I was passed out in my driver's seat in a parking lot, not going anywhere, but you're in the driver's seat and your truck can start up. It's an OWI in Michigan. I don't know if that's the same everywhere. And it was after that, after, you know, I had 3 prior OWIs and, you know, a divorce and loss of so many jobs, you know, none of that did it. It wasn't until that 4th OWI and I started to kind of come to in jail. You know, it was then that everything that I'd learned up until then that I started to put into practice. And you know, it took what it took, man. I don't, you know, it is really hard, I think, for a lot of people to pinpoint a certain point, but there are events that start to lead up. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think addiction's kind of for some it's kind of sneaky. It's like we wake up each day and you sew a piece of lead into this vest, you know, and over time you sew enough pieces of lead into that vest each day. You know, days become weeks, weeks become months, months become years. When you take off that vest, it's really fucking heavy.
Sure.
You know, and
Sure.
then you're like, holy shit, I didn't realize the weight of all of these things I was carrying with me, you know?
Yeah.
But another thing for me too was I had been trying to sell a story that it was just me. It was just about me. And, you know, it's kind of comical looking back because of how selfish and self-centered I was. Who else would it have been about? You know, it was, but I was finally able to see all of the things that I contributed to in the pain of other people's lives too, especially my mom. I mean, she was the last bridge that I had burned. And I think that was a part of coming to that awareness too, that, man, you know, no one's going to come help me. No one's going to come save me. I was sitting in a hotel room, in the fetal position, crying in Miami, Florida, and my mom had just told me I can't come back and live with her in Oregon. I took a 4.5 day Greyhound ride from Portland to Miami because I was going to go sell real estate and become a mogul. But really what I was doing the geographical and running. And when she told me that, I don't know where that courage came from for her to do that, because she was always the one that was bailing me out. And she said, son, I love you very much, but I cannot continue to watch you kill yourself with drugs and alcohol. And I don't know what you're going to do down there in Miami, Florida, but you can't come back here.
Sure.
And man, that's when I looked around. I was like, no one got me here but me. I've been blaming people my whole life, and and have been a willing participant to trade things for my addiction, my family, jobs, friends, relationships, and it's easy to think that I'm going up and putting money onto a bar and getting a drink, right? But it wasn't that. When you get into the problems phase, you're trading family for a drink, trading opportunity for a drink. You know what I mean? And it's a lonely place. It's a lonely place.
It really is. And to go back to, what your mom did, that's huge. I mean, I can relate to that. The love of my life did the same thing. She's like, we were living together, we were engaged, and it got to a point where we were no longer engaged. And then it got to a point where she's like, I can't help you anymore. You can't be here. She had her son and I had my 2 kids. And, I think that's important for people. And I've had Al-Anon people on here, and I need to have more. I need to seek these people out, because, you're right. We do a lot of damage to these folks, and it is okay to say no. You can still love them and not support, the train wreck. You know what I mean? So I think that's very important to highlight that there. So if somebody is listening, that they're listening to find out more because somebody they care about is going through something, you can still love them and not feed into it, right? I mean,
oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because I started an outpatient treatment center in 2018 and grew it into we ended up buying an old high school that had been abandoned, and awesome. Turning that into a detox residential. And then so we had all levels of care. And I always say that the most challenging part of that business wasn't getting someone sober and giving them the message of hope of recovery. It was working with family to encourage them and empower them to say no. My mom said no with in her mind, it had always been, if I say no, it could kill him.
Yeah.
Like if I really let go of him, he could die. And she finally was able to cross that and not be okay with it, just accept that that's the reality, that I may die. But if she continues to enable me, she's going to love me to death.
Right.
And I work really hard to try and empower families to be able to, in a healthy way, set those boundaries. If you want my help, I'll help you I'll say yes to treatment or yes to some form of recovery service. But I'm not going to say yes to the dollar amount that you need. I'm not going to say yes to you flopping in my house for the weekend because you don't have anywhere to go. I'll say, if you're wanting my help, I will gladly drive you to a place that can help you.
So what would you say then? What would you say, given, and I want to talk more about what you're doing, because I was looking at your webpage and the virtual treatment. I think that's great. I think that's great because there is a lot of anxiety, and it talks about that on your page about, the commute and getting there and, all the apprehension. If you can just do it sometimes from a safe space, you might open up a little bit more. But oh crap, am I going to lose my thought for real? Talk a little bit more about, drawing that line and supporting that way, because I've had discussions on Twitter where people are like, well, if you don't If you do it that way, you don't open your door and let them come stay at your house. If you don't do these things, they're going to die. So, and you talked about that, the distinction or whatever. So let's say somebody is in that mindset. They hear what you're saying, and I agree with it. That's my approach. That's my thoughts on it too. Somebody comes to you and says, okay, well, what if I say no to them coming in here drunk, high, or whatever, and then they go out and they don't make it? Then that's my fault. What would you say to somebody that says, then it's on me? What would you say?
That's a terrible tragedy and a devastating what if scenario.
It is. It is.
I always say, though, I mean, if we're going to play what ifs, then what if I say no and they find life?
Yeah.
What if they cross paths with someone that can prick their heart in a way that changes their whole mindset and they get recovery? Because if I continue to enable, I'm not only allowing them to continue down that destructive path, but they're in my life creating a destructive situation for me too.
Sure.
And part of what I'm saying is empowering someone to say, look, enough is enough. And I can't, like my mom, I mean, just take that, for example. I can't watch this person who I love dearly kill themselves with drugs and alcohol anymore. Because It's more than just them, getting loaded. It's the whole wave of destruction,
Yeah, I know you can't play what ifs. I just, I can see the fear that people would have. Like they're taking that on themselves. And that's not, I hope people don't do that. I mean, because, you didn't create it. Addiction isn't always, it gets to a point where, the choice was taken away from me. It was so bad. I could not function, I felt I could not function, the shakes or whatever, and you used a good word earlier, obsession, because it went from habit, it was habit in those fun times that you talked about. And then it became obsession to where it had to be a part of the daily routine. So I just want people to know that, saying okay is no. And sure, there might be negative consequences to saying no, but there could be positives too, and I feel like the positives
most of the time, there are positives to that. I've had to hug the necks of a lot of families that have lost their loved ones to overdose. We know that we're at an alarmingly rate of losing people to accidental overdose, a completely preventable death, right?
Yep.
And it is just super. I mean, one of the most heart-wrenching ones for me is there was a guy that I had taken to a football game in here in Arkansas. Razorbacks are like religion, and we went together. And I was helping him with his resume because he had big plans for his life. He was gonna, go out and do big things. And he had went back and started using again. And what had happened was he had an appointment to go into treatment the next day, but used one more time.
Yeah.
Ended up having one of those hot spots or hidden spots of fentanyl in that dose and killed him. And that, I had gotten to know his family, and they're just such good people. They're just, and we have over 100,000 of those kind of stories. They're not numbers. That one situation, there's an unfillable void left in that.
Yeah.
And so empowering someone just to try something different. We've said yes this whole time in this addiction. We've said yes to the money. We've said yes to the staying over the weekend. just try something different. I think in Al-Anon they have the 3 C's: didn't cause it, can't cure it,
Yeah.
and can't change it.
Yeah. I think that's it. Yep. Yep.
And so I think it would be natural for someone to feel fault in that, but hopefully over, through the grieving process, if that kind of tragedy did happen, they would be able to find peace at some point that there was nothing
Yeah.
that they could have done.
Yeah.
I mean, in step groups, we talk about no human power could have relieved our alcoholism or drug addiction.
Yeah. You can't, I tweeted this the other day, you as the addict, you can't love your way out of addiction. You can't love your children so much that it loves you out of it. Like I love my kids as much as anybody loves their kids, but it wasn't enough to stop it. And then with that tweet, I also said, you can't be loved out of it either. You have to make that choice. You have to give up. I think AA says it right. You have to give up. You have to give in and say, I can't do this. I need help, and I need to change everything and make that choice. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
it's an inward look, and it's always been scary. I've got, my past today is my greatest asset, but I had to go back in there and look and take some really, swallow some really sobering truths about myself, in order to find that freedom. I like what you said. I think too, for someone in addiction, finding recovery is and me, this is me included. I am impatient. I want things to happen overnight. I want to, it's it's like I'm able to keep this plant alive for a month. I've got this job for 2 weeks. I'm ready for a promotion. So I think I should get into a long-term relationship and with 2 weeks start a podcast, because I got shit to say, that
sure.
So, or just go buy a house and start a sober living. We just get so wrapped up in impatience and
yeah.
So what I say is, if a person's walked 10 miles into the woods, they're going to have to walk 10 miles out. There's a long road of reconstruction. I can remember, going out and, in Oregon, I'd go apply for jobs and then get these interviews, and then I would get the job, man. They'd call me and say, hey, you got the job pending you successfully passed the background check, which would just punch me in the gut, because I knew it was going to happen. And they'd inevitably call me and say, hey, your background check came back, and you can't, we can't hire you. And it was so hard, man. It was like, here I am trying to do better and facing all this adversity. Now looking back on that, I'm grateful for those moments, because they shaped who I am today, and some resilience. And I'm grateful that a broken shoelace isn't gonna cause my life to fall apart.
Yeah.
Like I can stand some stuff.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff there, man. That instant gratification, that's what drugs and alcohol do for us. I can't speak on the drug part because I never got into that. Cocaine a couple times, but it never attached, thank God. But there was a reason why I went for, it wasn't just go have a couple drinks. It was chug a half pint, and then I graduated to chug a pint, and then it was wake up and get as much down to the fifth as you can to calm yourself. And then, there was a time when I first started recovery, and it's just unreal how the mind works. I went into the basement, as I did every day when I'd come home and I'd go to drink. And I was really trying this a couple years ago. And I got down to the bottom of the basement where I always had my half pint in hand ready to go. And I just went through the motions, and I unscrewed the top. There was no bottle. I unscrewed the fake bottle, took the fake bottle, put it to my lips, and went like this. And I swear to God, I felt something. So there was, there's that part of that ritual, like my body was like, ooh, here it comes. But there was nothing there. You know what I mean? So, but the instant gratification, yep. I agree with that. And it's really hard to be patient. I like your analogy going in the woods. They talk a lot about You reach rock bottom when you quit digging. And you think about that, you dig and dig and dig and dig and dig. Well, how do you get out of the hole? You got to climb out, right? And if the hole's deep enough, you're not just going to turn around and get right out of there in 2 seconds. It's going to take some work. Absolutely. I think you made two really great points there. Gosh, there's so you talked about does your website and your Twitter feed have you I want to make sure I'm not crossing guests here, and I'm not going to edit, so I'm going to sound silly, but Narcan. You talk a lot about Narcan on your webpage. Narcan is life-saving. Talk a little bit about that. Do you mind talking about that? Because not a lot of people really understand what that is.
Yeah, no, it's naloxone. That's the Narcan is the brand name for naloxone, and naloxone reverses an overdose and allows someone to have a chance. I call it the Lazarus drug. I mean, it literally brings people back from the dead, and
wow, I like that.
I've had people, yeah, I've had, we in the treatment center that I ran and founded, we would have trainings on Narcan, and then we would give people the opportunity to carry it with them. And one of, I had a staff member that happened to be doing some peer support recovery work at a local sober living, and someone was overdosing in the bathroom, and she ran out to the car. This is literally, a day after our training, and she had Narcan, and she was able to save that person's life.
Wow.
Now, my thing next, what I'm going to say, at the risk of pissing off all the harm reductionists, that this is a huge debate. I don't want to get into that.
Sure.
But naloxone keeps someone naloxone can give someone an opportunity to find recovery. Now, that's not the only thing that we should be saying. It's because there's a big what next, right? If someone's saved via Narcan, they're taken to an emergency room at a hospital, there needs to be next steps. There needs to be some clear next steps. There's got to be some support in place to say, hey, if you're open to this, let's go right now. Let's get you someplace that can help build a foundation for a new way of living. And so we shouldn't stop at Narcan. And a lot of times that is a misconception that's where it is. That's where it ends. Like if there's not a lot of discussion after. Like I'm always like, what next?
Right. No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. I'm trying to become a part of this coalition in my area, and they're trying to go around to businesses and get them on board with keeping Narcan on hand, kind of just, with the first aid kit. Because it can save lives, man. It is very important.
It really does. And it's a tool in a toolkit, right?
Yeah.
It's an EpiPen. It's a defibrillator. And Arkansas just passed a law to where we're going to require high schools and colleges to have the life-saving drug right next to the AED. Someone's having a heart thing. So
there's no reason not to, in my opinion. I mean, I was on depression meds that every time I took a P test in treatment, the quick test popped me for benzos every single time, but it was because of the meds I was on. So one time in this very room where I'm sitting today, my great grandmother found me passed out and non-responsive. The MTs came at least 4 times in 1 month, but that's my story I've told before. But anyway, they took me down. They must have done some sort of test. They saw the benzos in my system, and they Narcan me because I was non-responsive, and it didn't do anything to me because it wasn't that. Yeah. So, but the point is, they used it thinking that it was something. It didn't hurt me. It did nothing to me. So why not have it available and use it? So I saw that on there, and I don't know enough about it, but I want people to know that it's not a scary thing. It will save lives. And that's why I wanted just to bring it up briefly, because you seem to, I mean, you clearly the expert on it compared to me, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it firsthand, and it works. I've seen it more than one should,
More than one would
and
want, probably.
exactly. So former clients of mine going into a restaurant and just finding a bathroom. That's where that's where we go.
Yeah.
And because of that drug was available, they get to live today, even after multiple times. I mean, I think that sometimes due to the stigma and kind of just throwing your hands up, we have or maybe they're just hateful people. They're like, how many times is it going to take? Maybe they just need to die because they can't learn. I interviewed someone on the recovery clinic that had overdosed like 12 times. And
Wow.
God, if we had just snuffed out that light, they wouldn't be here anymore doing the good work that they're doing. I mean, they're in the recovery community and recovering loud and proud, and so just having that awareness is good too. I think, getting into this part of the discussion, it's important to note that there's not one answer,
Right.
because there's not one problem. There are multiple problems, Scott. You know that.
Yes.
This is a complex addiction, the addiction crisis, the mental health crisis, whatever you want to say, the opioid crisis, is a multifaceted, complex problem. It deals with the drug trade. It deals with drug policies. It deals with government on the federal, state, and local levels. It deals with the recovery community. I kind of want to touch on just the recovery community in and of itself. Is, God, we can be some judgmental pricks, don't shoot our wounded. If there's someone down that's trying something
Amen.
that doesn't look shiny and cool, don't discourage them from trying to say something about recovery. I mean, we shouldn't have all that infighting that's going on,
I agree.
and you see it between your abstinence people versus the harm reductionist people. I mean, that's just the one clear example.
Yep. Yeah. And dude, I could talk to you all day.
Yeah. I know it's frustrating. We're losing people at an alarming rate, right?
We are.
So
and
there's a lot of emotion.
There is. And it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to have that, you want to help people, but to argue about it and to say that, you're right. The harm reductionists versus the people that are just stop, there is no one way to do this, and we got to stop pretending that there is. It's almost a case by case basis. That's why it's
frustrating.
It is, but that's why it's so important for people like you to be willing to come on and share this, and we get this out and acknowledge that and make that mainstream. It's the only people that I don't get along with in the recovery community are the ones that are saying, this is how I do it, so this is how it needs to be done. This is how you did it. This is what worked for you. Tell everybody that, and then let them work it out for themselves. Give them feedback or whatever. But, my biggest pet peeve is people get on social media and they're, like you just said, shoot or wounded. Like, well, you just need to do this. Dude, have you met this person? This might be the only thing that this person was able to do to reach out and ask for help or to say something. Yeah, I've seen so many people in the last couple of days talking about wanting to kill themselves, and you don't know that they don't have anybody to go talk to out in the real world. They might, like you said earlier, sitting in a closet, crying their eyes out, and the only thing they were able to do was send out a tweet. I want a hand being reached out. You know what I mean? We all know when we get to a certain point in addiction that what we're doing is not good. Yes, there's tough love, and we talked about that earlier with our families, but I don't need a stranger to tell me that I'm fucking up. I know that when I'm reaching out for help, I'm just, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think too, it's just difficult because you have, some people they don't have a circle to go to. They don't have a support system. So they reach out virtually online in hopes that maybe they don't have to put a bullet in their head today. Maybe that's the only thing, and we don't know that.
Yeah.
But even, I mean, I can get into, when I don't stop and breathe and really just like, all right, what can I pack into the stream of life today that's positive?
Yeah.
Sometimes I really have to do that and focus on it because I can get caught up in this kind of stuff
I
too.
know it, dude.
That's why I want to talk about it, is because I don't want to make, I don't want to, I want to make sure everyone has a chance
Yeah.
to find their own path. And some paths are wide, some paths are well trodden. And there's like, evidence that says if you go down this path, you have a good chance to build a foundation that's sustainable in recovery.
Yep.
And then there's some of these like eat some ketamine, some not well trodden paths, or some psychobilin, the mushrooms,
Yep.
psychedelics. This is a new psychotherapy, right? But who's to say that's not going to have someone find a path, their path? But I can understand when we're losing all of these lives to preventable overdose, and that doesn't talk about the people that are lost in addiction. I mean, that are still alive. I mean, we're talking about a huge number of people, and and the families are suffering, communities are suffering. It doesn't go to say that. I don't even know what I was going to say. I lost my train of thought.
That's all right, man. That's all right. We talked about that yesterday on the podcast with the guy that I had on yesterday, Jim, and it's it's just gone. But you know what?
Maybe there's a few brain cells still kind of damaged from my use, but
yeah, well, I think that keeps it real, man. You know what I mean? Like we're two dudes having a conversation, and hopefully somebody can listen and hear something. We all have brain farts, so it is what it is. I think there's God, dude, there's so much. I really enjoy the way that you present yourself, and clearly, the things that you're doing on the outside of here. I mean, you were able to, and I don't want to keep you too long. I want to keep this. I know you got things to do. You've came so far in these 15 years. You have gotten everything expunged. Is that correct? Is that what you told me?
Aside from DUI, I mean, Oregon law, they can expunge everything except a DUI. I don't know why that exists. Otherwise, it would be. And then I received a pardon from the governor of Oregon. I changed a doctor's prescription from a 1 to a 4 after a car accident for Vicodin. I changed a 1 to a 4, and it was just one of those Hail Mary situations. And
sure.
Knew I wasn't going to get away with it, but had that little 0.5% chance of what if maybe it works.
Sure.
But I was struggling. I was, I needed a lot of help. And anyway, so a lot of time has passed since then. And I have I'm grateful I have a daughter that's 11 who's never seen me use. But I was also grown up in a world where really hasn't seen any of the like other destructive things that take place. She's been able to be a kid, and not a lot of us can say that. I grew up in a very unpredictable alcoholic home, and I'm just grateful that my daughter hasn't had to experience that. I didn't graduate high school. I was ordered by a judge to get a GED, and that was very awesome because later on, when I wanted to go to college and do something, I had that GED, right. And was able to do that. And I always say the community college experience and in getting my little 2-year degree is my most important, because that's the one I didn't believe I could get.
Sure.
It took an army of people supporting me, encouraging me, and sustaining me every step of the way. And then I was able to go on and, get a formal education for myself.
Yeah. Just what you've been able to do, man, in 15 years, it's amazing. And, it don't mean nothing coming from a stranger, but to read stories like this, I had 8 months of sobriety today, and this is the longest.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's the longest I've ever had. I've been working on it for years. I've been, I never really
Of
wanted
course.
it. You know what
We're
I
on
mean?
our 10th second chance, right?
Yeah, I never wanted it until this last go, but I was dabbling, I guess, if you will. And so today, I'm feeling pretty good about this, and to see stories like yours, it's very inspiring, man. And to
Thank
see
you.
this,
And you absolutely should feel good about this. And look at what
yeah,
you're doing. Like, I think a defining moment, I'm gonna, at the risk of stepping out on a limb and being wrong, what you're doing with this podcast is part of your purpose.
sure,
You
maybe,
found, you found, you don't know who you're reaching
yeah,
with this. And, but it's definitely contradictory to the way you used to live
sure,
in secret and in shame. Now you're out here, giving people a platform and yourself to share this story. Like, we're talking about things that were extremely painful and devastating, right?
yeah,
And we're talking about them openly
yep,
because we've healed from a lot of that.
yeah. You talked about putting the lead in the vest, right, and that weight to let go of these things and live just, an honest life. Everything that I did and hid from my ex-fiance, she now knows. And I'm making these amends as I go, and it's freeing, dude. Life, the weight is not, I don't wake up and like, oh my God, all right, so what did I say yesterday? What did I do last night? All right, so I have to do this in order to make sure that this looks like it was real. And I mean, I talked about it yesterday. I went as far, dude, as to pretend I tripped over a cat to fake brain shit going on in my head. You know what I mean? So not having to do that is so freaking freeing. And it's, I mean, it's a whole new life, dude. And
There's just a lot of insanity in addiction, and we think of these ways. I talk about my solutions to my problems were always worse than my actual problems. Like, I had a shift at work that I was trying to do, and then I was like, man, I really don't want to be here, and I really want to get high. And so instead of finishing the shift, which would have been the easier route,
sure.
I smashed my hand with a pallet
Mm.
to get out of work. They sent me to the hospital for x-rays. They did not give me any Vicodin, which was what I was wanting.
Oh.
They sent me back to work in a sling with ibuprofen.
Jesus Christ, dude.
So, I mean, it's just crazy how I used to live,
I before alcohol touched my lips, and it shows that this thing starts earlier than that. Uh, Whatever. World of Warcraft came out. I'm a huge gamer, and I called into work after requesting the day off, and they told me no. And I called in, and I was going to get fired. My boss called and said, you better call me back to see if you still have an effing job, because I called in because this game was coming out. And so I went and I took an old doctor's receipt. I went to the doctor's office and asked for an invoice from a previous visit because I needed it for something. I don't even remember what it was. I went, I whited out the date, took it to a copier place, changed the date, took it in, borrowed crutches from a buddy, wrapped my ankle up, took the invoice into work, said, oh, yeah, I rolled my ankle I was coaching at the time at basketball practice. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Here, I thought you were just doing this for a game. Then I proceeded to have a beer bottle cap in my sock for the next week so I wouldn't forget to limp at work. What in the world, dude? The effort that took, if I could use that power for good, holy crap. It's just,
Yeah.
it is insanity. It's
Funny
insane.
how you held yourself accountable to for the lie,
Right.
No, that's what I talk about all the time is like, if some people you go on TikTok and here's what I know what I was going to say now when I lost my train of thought is
Awesome.
We can trade addictions. I mean, it's fairly easy for someone that's has an addictive personality. The dopamine hit that you get from like attention, that can cause someone to relapse and go back to using, like chasing the clicks, chasing the likes. And I see a lot of that. And so what I was going to tell you is like, I got self-regulation, sometimes when I see stuff out there, I've got to like hold back and like just refrain from pen and tongue, and my thumbs, like just don't even engage in that. because I don't know the driving force behind that person and what they're doing with their motivations, right?
Yep.
And they don't need a lesson from me. I'm not their teacher or mentor.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And
Yep.
so
Yep.
most of the time I'm good on that. But like, so someone reaching out for help online, it is so hard. I find that there's a lot of courage in that because we know what the internet is, right? There's so many trolls out there, and you risk like saying, "Hey, I need help. I want to kill myself." You risk someone saying, "We'll do it."
Yeah.
Some troll out there.
Yep.
And so it's very difficult. What I want to call out is this. We can sensationalize things, and with respect to recovery, just because I stop using and drinking doesn't mean my life's going to get good. Actually, that's when alcoholism made its appearance, when I was stone cold sober.
Yep.
That's when alcoholism really appears. And that's what I have to work on healing, work on solving. And so when I see things like the before and afters, which are great, people are wanting to say, look what I look like. And then, but without any context added to that, if that's all it is, that's a false narrative saying all I have to do is stop using and I don't look like this person. And 3 weeks later, I'm taking a selfie in a mirror with makeup on.
All right.
I'm talking about men too.
I know, dude.
You know what I mean? So, and if that's all I have, okay. But please, like, please have a community where you're, I want to see where you're talking about how you show up for work on time and you keep a job, because I was totally unemployable. That's what I'm going to relate to. Show me how you put together your life in a way that has enabled you to find some success. And that's the stuff that I'm interested in, and I think a lot of people crave that genuine, raw recovery. Like, hey, I'm out here struggling. I'm out here, but I'm not going to give up, I went, that treatment center, and I haven't really shared publicly about this just because there was a lot of pain involved in it, but I'm not all the way. I'm really good at defending you.
Right. I know where you're going.
I'm not all the time good at sticking up for myself.
Yep.
And I don't want to muddy the water, but that treatment center that I was involved in, the ownership got together and they cut my head off, and I felt betrayed, and I was going through a tough time, a personal divorce. And months later, after a lot of that stuff, let me back up. When I went through a divorce, the recovery community went on this whisper campaign. They wanted to know why. So and I wasn't sharing anything. So they started making shit up, and it was very difficult that I had found myself in a position where I was the topic of conversation and people speculating, which I get that we do, especially online, there's, we tend to just go after the gossip, right? What's the juicy drama of the day? And I never thought that I would be that.
Yeah.
And so going through a divorce and finding a new dynamic with my daughter and working with my ex-wife to become co-parents is difficult enough, but to have people like really attacking you really sucked. And, I got into the business of treatment to help others. I was seeing this old antiquated treatment landscape in Arkansas that was cold and sterile, and it was just because this is the way it's always been, and I wanted to disrupt that, and we did. And like I said, we totally changed how we approached addiction in Arkansas, and I love that and it's still around, and And that's just a testament to what that we did when we started it. But man, going through that and having your integrity attacked and character, and just people believing blindly that
Yeah.
this is the way it was, but just categorically false. Like, I don't know if you've ever been on the other side of that, where people are saying things about you and to you, and they're just not true. And they're baseless attacks, right?
Yeah.
And so going through that, I actually ended up going to Peru by myself to hike Machu Picchu, and just to try to get away and find some solitude, and I'm grateful that I had the resources to do that.
Yeah.
And I was really angry, and afraid and down. And, it was out there in the Andes Mountains that I was like, really was able to go internally and be like, this same recovery community that, and it was a smaller group of people than I make it,
Sure.
because my mind wants to magnify things.
Yep.
But it's like the same people that I have like really dedicated my life to helping and serving. Now here it is. Are you still willing to help this community in spite of the things being said?
Yeah.
And that was my biggest thing, because I wanted to leave. I wanted to run away from I've got an accounting degree. I've got a background in higher education, and I could just totally leave this community and say, screw them, and go out and do other things,
Yeah.
and make a lot more money. There's not a lot of money we get paid in a different way, right? I get
Absolutely.
paid. My goal is when I see someone turn their life around and they graduate college, or they do something, they get their record expunged, or they get that job that they want. You know what I mean?
Right. I do.
And so that's how we get paid. And so I'm out there in the Andes Mountains, and I'm like, do I just say this population isn't worth it anymore just because there's some adversity now? Like, it really challenged me to think, like, why did you really start that treatment center?
Right.
And man, it in that moment of bitterness was born a renewed energy to serve the community of recovery. And it doesn't matter, because it's bigger than me. People are still lost and afraid in addiction and experiencing tremendous challenges. And so crossing that bridge in my heart was important, in spite of all of those other things that were said that were completely untrue. Without getting into that stuff, just a messy business deal. I wasn't protected. I was naive to the fact that I had started this thing, and everybody joining is on the vision and mission that I have, and that just wasn't true. I wasn't protected as well as I thought I was in that business relationship, and paid that price. And I joke today that Harvard Business couldn't have given me a better education than that. If I went and got a master's in business from them, that hard knocks of life. But anyway, I say all that to say that renewed energy and that renewed effort has been put into this virtual space that you're talking about. And it's funny when you look back, you're like, the spiritual nature of recovery being bigger than we are. You can look back and see where those little nuggets were laid, or those little seeds. Like during the pandemic, I started that recovery clinic with a friend of mine. So I had a little bit of taste to the virtual space and saw the value in it. And then we also had to blend recovery, our treatment in person and virtual, right?
Yep.
And so all of those little seeds started to bloom, and my focus now is the reentry population. You want to talk about adversity, you want to talk about challenges. People coming out of prison and and jail don't have a fucking chance. My language is strong there.
That's fine.
Without without an amazing amount of support.
Yeah.
But these are the forgotten ones. These are the ones that have that shame and stigma attached to them, that they shouldn't have done what they did, right?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be where I'm at today without people seeing past those mistakes.
Yep.
And seeing the human and seeing the person and the potential to invest in me and to give me certain truths about myself that were hard to swallow. And then it was up to me to reflect on those and make adjustments in my life. And so I along with someone else started, something called Wellfi Health and Peer Connection. Those two are separate. One's licensed therapy for people online, and then the other is peer support. It's a network of peer support specialists that you can engage with real time, or you can schedule. And we didn't really talk about the power of lived experience, but when someone comes out of prison, they're a little crispy, right?
Sure.
They're a little raw. They're not, they're not, they're at the beginning. They're like me. I mean, I was that unlovable creature, so to speak. And I'm hard to help. The people, I had therapists that tried to help me, and their vein during our therapy session, their vein started coming out of their head because they're so angry. They couldn't get anywhere with me. We're difficult. But what a peer support specialist can do is they can go in there and build that rapport within minutes, because you and I can say, I just spoke to 100 people that were incarcerated. They're in this program, this treatment program. It's like in between. If they can finish this program, they don't have to go to prison due to the technical violation, right?
Gotcha.
They're on parole. They ended up getting high, so they have an opportunity to go into this treatment program. They're still incarcerated, but it's a last ditch attempt, so they don't have to go back to prison, right?
We call that drug court around here.
Right, these people are still incarcerated.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We have drug courts too.
I'm sorry, not drug court. I'm sorry, not drug court. Never mind. I think it's something else. I'm thinking of something completely else. Yep.
Absolutely. Community corrections runs it, and it is kind of a treatment. But talking to them and sharing the story is when I can share openly and raw, I connect. Because it's truth, right? What we try to do with the probation and parole officers is the same thing for people coming out of prison and incarceration. Is they're supposed to serve as a mentor and help, right? The second we put a gun on their hip, though, we lose all of the walking hand in hand, right? It's hard. It's just the way it is, man. It's hard to trust and be vulnerable with someone about my life situation and what's going on when they can put me in jail.
Right.
I feel like I'm going to incriminate. There's a criminal thinking and there's criminal code, right? Inmate code that exists. And that's a separate topic of helping people get over that and finding different ways to think and operate. But peer connection is meant to do a critical part of recovery, especially with the reentry population coming out. It's to connect in the very beginning and to build the trust that is so vital. Because when it's Saturday night and it's 8:00 and I get in a fight with my old lady and I want to get high, I'm not going to call my probation officer. I'm not going to call the judge. I'm not going to call,
Yep.
But peer connection you can call and engage right away.
Yeah, I think
If I haven't made an attempt, and so if I have not built my recovery circle yet, if I'm not doing some other things that are available, if I'm not, and so what I did was connect. Are you familiar with monitoring services?
like,
They call them offender management systems, and it's a way
hmm.
for me to virtually check in with my probation officer and parole officer.
Oh, okay. That's cool. No,
Um,
I'm
and
not.
yeah, yeah. So there's these software apps, and people that are under supervision can, instead of having to drive if they don't have transportation, and it removes those technical violations, right? Because I don't
Good.
think the parole or probation officer wants to send people back to prison based on some
Right.
of this stuff, but by law they have to. And so these monitoring services exists to reduce some of those things. Well, everywhere in the country, has some sort of supervision monitoring system with their community corrections department, but none of them have connected recovery support services to these monitoring apps. And so we're one of the first. We are the first, to my knowledge, to marry those two services to have available for people coming out of prison and jail. And it's one of those low hanging fruit items, and it just is like hidden in plain sight, or just makes sense. It's common sense to do
Yeah,
that. I
that
mean, we
sounds
have a
awesome.
captive
Yeah.
audience, and you know, and we know it works. So, and it does.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Sponsorship is great, but you're shoehorned into one avenue. You're locked into the AA if you're going in the sponsorship. But peer recovery coaching is starting to pick up steam here in my area. And that's the peer recovery. I mean, you're talking with people who get a certification that can be recognized. Not everybody recognizes it, but you can get that certification. You're talking to people that are just like you. And what I like about that, when I got into it is that multiple pathway thing. It's like, okay, a lot of people already know kind of what they need. So instead of telling them this is what you need to do, let's talk about what you need and I'll help you get there. I'll walk that path with you. I'm not going to tell you which path to take and how to do it. We'll kind of walk it together. And I think that is very important. So that is awesome that you're part of that and promoting that. Um,
Yeah, no, I'm grateful to hear you say that, because through shared decision making, and kind of being on the same foot, and because what a peer recovery coach does is advocates on
yeah,
behalf of that person, especially, I mean, in this particular situation. um, but through lived experience
yep,
is how I get to the other parts, right? Like I have been blessed with sponsorship that didn't try to be my God. When they didn't have an experience, or when they didn't have knowledge of a certain situation that I was facing, they directed me to someone else. And I think sometimes we just get into playing attorney, playing doctor, playing therapist on somebody, when we don't have business doing that.
yeah,
And as far as a sponsor is concerned, really, when it comes to what you mentioned, the 12-step community, is it's just in the way that it was designed, is just to take someone through the steps.
that's it. Yeah,
That's it. It's
yep,
to show me these things and how you have recovered as a way of
yes,
applying these
that's
things.
that's the key word
But too
there.
many times we cross into, and I get too personal into your life, and
That's dude.
start making suggestions and
And
recommendations.
that's where the AA goes wrong. It doesn't say sponsor at all in the first 164 pages, which haven't changed since Bill W. wrote it in 1930s. So that the ego gets into the way, and that's one thing they're trying to tell you to get rid of, right? And I had a sponsor that told my ex fiance that I was offering sexual favors to women for alcohol, and he still hasn't responded to me when I got out of treatment and found this out. You know what I mean? You talk about people saying things behind your back. This is my sponsor. This is the guy that was supposed to be there for me. And I didn't. When it was brought to my attention by my ex fiance, I was like, I don't think I did that. I was drunk a lot, dude. You know what I mean? I looked through my phone. I looked through the messages to see, did I do that? who the hell did I do that to? Like, I couldn't think of one person that I'd be like, maybe that one. But anyway, long story short, that's the danger of that. They become your God. And I think that's a really good way to put that, because they start telling you, this is what you need to do. This is who you need, and start to dictate, these things in your life. Now, it's worked for some people. So I'm pro AA because it does work. But I'm also, I want to be logical about it. It's not for everybody. And I'm not going to tell anybody that they need to do it this a certain way. A couple things that you touched on, and I'll get you out of here.
No,
So you keep.
I mean, let's
Okay.
talk as long as you want.
Right on. The virtual thing I think is very important. When COVID hit, I was going upwards of 9 meetings a day with my first sponsor, as far as like Zoom goes. So that really opened a lot of things. I never thought that I'd be in an AA meeting in like Brazil, but I did because of the virtual aspect. And I'm really glad that we're starting to embrace that, and giving people opportunities to be able to do things from home. The value that we get paid in different ways. I don't have an income right now because my license is not. I live out in the middle of nowhere.
That may be harder for you to accept me saying that.
No, I'm agreeing with you, because these tweets and these messages that I get of people that have listened to the podcast, I am rich in other ways that I've never been before in my entire life. I always say that, I have no license. I haven't seen my children in person in over a year. I talk to them on the phone every day. I lost, my fiance, the love of my life. I'm living back home basically, with the woman that raised me, but my life is still better than it was before, because I'm not carrying all that weight like we talked about. And, I have hope. Yeah. That, like you, every time I get an email, I'm like, frick, another shot down. No, thanks. But I have hope that it's going to turn the corner. I have hope because people like you come on and share, and you've had success. And I'm starting to get that thing, where I'm thinking a little bit better about myself. Like, maybe I won't be able to do all the things that you've done, but I am worthy of doing good things and potential to do great things. And that's something I never had before. And I wouldn't trade that to go back to me making the money that I was making in my addiction days and somehow faking it and making it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just the recovery support, that thing that you're talking about that you got going on there, dude, that is such a big deal. I think that is instrumental in saving lives. Absolutely. And so you have Wellfi, which is your virtual
therapy.
Virtual therapy, right? And then what was the other one called?
It's called Peer Connection.
Peer Connection. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen really anybody try to organize the movement that is peer recovery, and so we're wanting to be like the Uber of peer recovery, right?
Hell yeah.
Like on demand. If you need help, we're here. And so it's building a network and having a population of peer supports that are trained.
Awesome.
They have a certain level of training and credential that they know not to step in. They know boundaries. There's symmetrical guideline. You know what I mean? So it's lived experience is the key, right? The fact that I can use my unique asset that is my past in this situation with some other things that create the professional capacity that peer supports have is something that has been really cool to be a part of. I want to touch on what you were saying too, is like, it's when you're living what you're living, it is difficult sometimes to have that vision outside of like, okay, what happens after? I mean, is this ever going to end? I had a mentor, beat into me that life is not a continuation of present circumstances. Life is not a continuation of present circumstances. It changes. Things will change. And I can say truly and genuinely that I am grateful that I am no longer a part of that company I founded. That has taken a while to get to.
Sure.
And I'm grateful that they are still operating and helping people overcome addiction. And I'm humbled to have founded that.
Yeah.
You know, all of that other stuff, the messy, you know, I did spend my time in resentment and, you know, and in fact, I played with a lot of fire when it comes to, I was at the casino for a few months and just trying to cope, man. And I look back and it's like, you know, sometimes getting through something that's very difficult isn't going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes along the way. And one of the things that's constant, though, is I am not alone. I'm not living on an island of one. And that is why I was able to survive that. And it didn't have to put a gun in my head, bullet in my head, or, you know, I didn't have to go back and, you know, drink and use again.
Yeah.
You know, that's the constant that has been in my life since I've found recovery, is that I'm together. I'm connected. Now I can run for the cliff, but the way I've built my recovery foundation is I have tangled my life up with you. Because I know sometimes I do want to run for the cliff, you know?
Yeah.
But I have tangled my life up with you in a way that it's very difficult for me to cut all those ties with my recovery community. And so by the time I do get to the cliff and I'm looking over the edge, I don't want to jump anymore. You know?
Right.
And that's intentional. We need to be intentional. Recovery doesn't just happen when I wake up and everything. No, it is intentional. I have to do some things that are not fun. And most of the time, the things that I don't want to do become my biggest blessings. When I face these certain things and challenges that I don't want to, like the amends process that I went through.
Yeah.
You know, those are some of my greatest memories of actually standing up and looking people in the eye and saying, look, I wronged you. How do I make this right?
Yep.
Developing that in my life and operating under that principle has been tremendously positive, you know? And so I really love recovery, and I'm so grateful to have overcome what I feel sometimes are insurmountable challenges. Like, it's never going to end. You know, it's crazy that some of these things, you know, there's still some pain sometimes. You know, I'll be trying to do something and I'm met with resistance because of, you know, that history there, and people still have questions about it. But the truth is that about that whole thing is I was able to start a treatment center that helped a lot of people and continues to help a lot of people, and people find gainful employment through that facility, which is incredible for a guy like me who came to Arkansas with a suitcase full of clothes and a criminal record.
Amazing.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah. You know, and so I'm grateful for that separation, right? Because it led to what I'm doing today. And I'm remarried. I have the most wonderful, amazing woman as a partner, and she's my biggest cheerleader, man. And she, a lot of the things about what I was just talking about have come from her and helping me like process. And she's got, you know, two beautiful daughters who are my stepchildren, 13 and 5. And so I'm surrounded by women. And that is a book topic in and of itself. Sure. And how to find peace and right. that. No, we have a lot of fun, man. And I think listening to you talk it's, you know, recovery and energy and enthusiasm can be found in the mundane, because as an overdose survivor, I could have missed all of this. Right.
Right.
And for me to sit here and think I'm bored, or I'm looking around and, things aren't right. Things aren't the way they should be. I can get into that. And that's a negative space, right? But
Yep.
what I want to kick in is the fact that, we survived addiction. We are in recovery today. And my real problems today are me resisting the principles of recovery. When I resist, that's when I have a problem, and
Sure.
that's really it, And my heart hurts that you haven't been able to be a light in your kids' eyes, but I hold out the hope and have seen things happen that are beyond our imagination. And so, like finding balance in that is hard, finding acceptance in that is hard. And it's just putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And building yourself up.
Yeah.
Still walking 10 miles out, still still walking out of the woods,
Yeah, absolutely. And the acceptance is key. That's all there is to it. And once I was able to do that, I'm going to go watch my son play minor league, little league. People should just say T-ball, but it's not T-ball. It's above that, on Monday. And I'm looking forward to doing that. I mean, he's like, if you want to come, you can come, Dad. You can come watch. I don't care. And that was the first time that was kind of like, let's see, I dropped off some baseball and basketball cards to him a few weeks ago. And I put them on the porch, took off, ran, hopped in the vehicle that brought me in and took off. Well, they happened to see me run by the window or whatever, but I'm doing what I feel they need to have done. And I'm not going to push them. I'm going to show patience, and it's working out. And it's important for people to know that have lost those connections, that all I could do is continue to stay sober and do the next right thing. I know it sounds cliche and so easy to do, but it is the next right thing. One thing I wanted to mention too.
Sometimes the next right thing is the hardest next thing, though, right?
It's yeah. The hardest thing is to talk to a voicemail every time I call them. I'd call them every night, and if they didn't want to talk, I would leave. Their mom told me she's been great. I give her nothing but praise for doing this alone while I'm trying to get my crap together. And when I was not trying to, she had to do it on her own. And she's an amazing mom as far as that goes. And she said she would play the voicemails for the boys every time. So I talked to a voicemail for months and months and months and months and months. Hey, boys, it's Dad. Just wanted to know how your day goes. I went, love you. How's this going? How's that doing? I love you. Goodbye. I'll call you tomorrow. And I had to accept that that's all I could do, but I was doing something. And it may not have felt like a lot, but once I was able to listen to what the hell other people were telling me, that was all I could do, and accept that, it became a lot easier. And those are the kind of messages that I think that are important for people to hear. And you going to Peru to climb a mountain to deal with this thing, drastic changes take drastic work, right? So, I mean, that's what you had to do to get through it. My thing that people would be like, well, that's kind of weird. How does that? I go out at 3:00 in the morning when the road's dead and the stars are out and it's quiet and there's nothing but, finally the frogs are chirping again here in Michigan, but there's nothing but the wildlife to hear, and just sit in silence and listen to the fire crackle. That's what I need to do. And some people think that's weird. It's 3:00 in the morning. You should be asleep, get on a schedule. Well, I'm doing what I got to do, right, to find that inner peace. And if you got to go climb a mountain in Peru, that's what you got to do. It's not things like simple. It can be something as simple as you sit here and you talk to yourself. You got the shitty committee going off in your head, and you're like, I can't lay down. I got things I got to do. Well, when you're in the thick of this thing and your mind is going 6 ways from Sunday on everything, to lay down and sleep for a couple hours, rest can be recovery, and you just got to let it go and do the things that you have to do to make it right.
Yeah, no, we can get into running 100 miles an hour and forget to breathe. So I love that you get out there and listen to the sounds of nature and connect. Especially being in the virtual space, we can, finding connection to nature is one of the things that I love doing. Um, Man, I appreciate what you're doing, and I love that going to t-ball and and not forcing it. I love hearing you say that because I need to hear that. I need to hear that, and I can apply that in a different situation in my life.
Sure.
To remember that the universe is working, man,
Yeah.
and the universe has our best interest. When we can surrender to the fact and say, look, I can't do this alone, and please help me. And when you say the next right thing is sometimes the most challenging thing, is it's not running out there on the field and like trying to force it, like, hey, I want to be, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Throwing my,
it's doing those
yeah.
it's doing the small, repeated, meaningful things.
Yep.
I mean, in the interest of time, I know you probably have other things to do today, but I'd like to share a story about my
Yeah,
dad.
please. Sure.
My dad passed away during the pandemic because of lung cancer and alcoholism. And if you've ever had to watch someone or say goodbye to someone that is dying from alcoholism, it is not pretty. It is not pretty, because the circumstances that are present aren't just with the physical health, right? I mean, my dad didn't have anything. He didn't have anything. And in his name, no house, no truck. It was very, very devastating. And, this is a man that, really attempted to try throughout his life. I mean, I remember him teaching or coaching Little League, my baseball team. And he used to, take me fishing and introduce me to those experiences. And then, alcoholism took over my life, his life, my sister's life, and my mom's left to try to manage all of this, in the family. But anyway, so when I got sober, we it was a difficult relationship to manage between him and I. And I did my men's thing, and what I want to say is sometimes there's a lot of layers to this stuff, the father and the son relationship.
Oh yeah.
Just because I passed that first layer doesn't mean there's not going to be another one underneath it, and another one underneath it that I'm going to have to face at some point. And I wasn't aware of that until I'm like right in the mix of it. And so, just in the interest of time, he hurt my sister in some kind of business deal. And she was also at the time trying to get out of a toxic relationship that was destructive. And, I really, really got mad, and I let the hate flow through me.
Sure.
Mark Twain used to write like scathing, hateful letters to people, and he would give them to his wife to send, but she'd never send them, And there's a lot of healing in that. Like, don't send the email, write it out, don't send it. But in this, I made a mistake, and I didn't feel like it was a mistake at the time. I think he needed to know. That's what I was like. And so I sent this letter to his mailbox, and it was a devastating letter, and it did what I wanted it to do, and it hurt him. And we didn't, I amputated him out of my life, and here I am in recovery, and just became resentful and bitter towards him. And people would come up to me and say, you gotta solve this. It's starting to come in, and it's starting to present in other areas of your life, and this resentment's starting to take a toll on you. And I'd be like, in my pride, I'd, bow up and say, whatever. And finally, somebody shared something in a meeting that I was willing to try. What they did to help with their resentment was they sent their sister letters once a week about their favorite memories together growing up. And I thought, that's positive. I need some of that. And so I went to Target, got some got a handful of cards, and I started sending my dad a letter like once a week and thanking him and sharing gratitude, right? And about him taking me fishing, introducing me to the Red Wings because they're from
Oh
Michigan.
yeah.
My
Yep.
mom and my dad were, and I still have a lot of family up there, by the way. And coaching Little League and all these like positive experiences that we did, and I didn't say anything else. I just shared positivity. And what happened to me was I was being cleaned from the inside out of that. I was being purged of that resentment, and I started, seeing the human and that my dad is. And he sent me a text one day saying that Thursdays were his favorite day of the week because he would get that letter. And anyway, so that relationship still had boundaries, but it was restored. And uh, two years later, he's no longer with us. He didn't stop. He
Yeah.
continued to be who he was in that. But I didn't hate him like I
Hmm.
did. And so here's the really cool thing. And I know this is a long story, but it's good.
No, you're good.
When I found out that he had been diagnosed with lung cancer, um, one of the days that I went to visit him, he was excited that he was going to like cook this stew for us when we went and visited him. And when I got there, I realized that he hadn't left bed in 2 weeks,
Hmm.
and there's black mold all over the place. He's got an oxygen tank, and he had kept all that from me. And he was probably three in that moment. He was going to die, and very quickly there. He was in a relationship with a woman who he was the caretaker of. She had was missing limbs and confined to a wheelchair.
Hmm.
And so none of the house was kept. And I'm being graphic because this is what happens at the end of life in respect to alcoholism. Sometimes, I
Sure.
mean, there's dog shit on the floor. It was a mess. And thankfully, a friend of mine allowed me to take him and put him up in his motel where he could receive hospice. And my sister came in from Oregon, and we were there at the end of his life together, and I got to hold his hand while he went to the other side. And he was extremely angry, and he was extremely afraid during that time, but he wasn't alone.
Right.
And I got to hold his hand and tell him I love him and how much I appreciate him.
Hmm.
And when I went to his girlfriend's house where he lived to get whatever stuff he had to clean out, I dropped a box, and my sister picked up all of those letters that he had saved and cherished. They were there. He saved them, and those were his prize. And
Wow.
had I not taken that suggestion and overcome that resentment that I had and was able to let go, Scott, I wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have cared. My pride and ego and resentment would have said things like, screw him.
Yeah.
He did these things to me. I don't care that he's
Fuck.
gone. You know what I mean?
I
Like
I know
that,
exactly what you mean.
that's why for me, it's important for me not to harbor anything, man, because I don't know what life's going to blindside me with. And God, I can't tell you how grateful I am to have held his hand and loved on him in those last moments, because he needed his son there in that.
Hmm.
And if I had that resentment, I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't. And so what I'm doing today, creating these positive ripples and being intentional, I don't know what's going to happen down the road, but I know it's going to be positive. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and we have to have that, man. Your story hits kind of close to home, and the first point I'll talk about real quick is when the box was dropped and the envelopes came out, and he'd saved those things. You didn't really realize, how important those were necessarily. Last night I had a conversation with my stepsister, and it turns out, I had like no relationship with my dad or her or my sister or brother or whatever. Turns out they know all about me. And it turns out I had grandparents that were keeping baseball clippings on their refrigerator, and I can count on one hand how many times I went to their house. And so that was like, wow, I've been missing out on something maybe. And
Yeah.
then you talking about sending these letters. So I pride myself on this podcast when I speak that I'm as authentic as possible. And if it sounds rude, I mean, nobody knows the situation, but I will say to be as authentic and honest as possible right now. My relationship with my mother, I cannot stand her. And I try my best never to use the word hate with anybody. But if there's a person on the planet that I would use that word for, it would be that. So I'm hearing you tell these things, and you're talking about, sending these postcards with all these good memories. And I'm like, okay, I am willing to go to any lengths to rid myself of resentment and negativity and live a positive and healthy life. I'm willing to go to any length to do it. And I'm listening to you, and I'm just trying to, like, what would I say? And none come to mind. They're all crap, but I'm sure there's something in there. And so it's something I'm going to consider. I there are podcasts that have never made it to the interwebs. They're just sitting here because they were podcasts that I just got on and I talked myself, one to my ex-wife, and then one about my dad and the situation going on there. And those are helpful. But I will consider doing what you did, because you can hear the peace in your voice. I have been, and in fact, I've talked about it in recent weeks with people close to me, that if my mom passed tomorrow, I, I don't know if that's true. That might be, as you said, me puffing out my chest and trying to be a man. Like, it won't bother me. I don't know if that's going to be true or not. And my sobriety and recovery is worth more to me than to carry a grudge to somebody that, if they mean as little as they do to me, then why do I hate them so much? You know what I mean? So I'm going to consider that. So I appreciate you sharing that story, and
Yeah.
um, that'll be something that I'll consider, man.
I mean, it really helped me. And I'm glad that, I mean, I can't, it's crazy how um, spot on that hit you and
Yeah,
related to you.
yeah. I like I said, I haven't had a relationship with my dad last night, but you always don't know what's going on in the background. I found out last night. I'd always known that my dad had seen his mom pass. He was there when that happened. A piece of farm equipment fell on her. But I found out last night that um, he was in the piece of equipment that got jammed, and she was trying to help, and the hydraulics gave out, and it crushed her while he was in it. And
Mm.
his dad just passed away. It'd be my grandpa, but I don't know the man. He passed, and I found out last night that he blamed my dad basically from the day it happened till he passed. Blame
Mm.
my dad for doing that. And so this guy has been distant. He doesn't show emotion. He's an introvert. And I found myself crying last night because it's like, Jesus, how does somebody handle that? Your own father, you know what I mean? That's for a different time, but you don't know what's going on. And so dude, it's really inspiring, and I appreciate you sharing that so much, because you show up and you didn't look what your dad was hiding, to protect you in a way. Sure, he was doing all these other things, but he was trying to protect you from that worry and that exposure to that. So very
Yeah.
powerful stuff, man. Very powerful stuff. All right. Well, you know what? I let's wrap it up, and leave it with that powerful moment. I think that's something that people can walk away from and consider. I will make this promise that I am going to write at least one postcard to my mother, and I'm going to send it out, one positive thing, and I will then go from there, because at the end of the day, I don't want to carry this crap anymore. So
That's what it's all about. It's clearing out the wreckage and blockage in our spiritual arteries so we can be the people that we want to be and become. And it's so hearing that other guy talk about the postcards and then me applying it, and now you're potentially you've just committed.
I did.
This is not a potentially thing. You're going to go do
no, this is
so
going to
see
happen.
how it works. Like, I mean, it's just crazy. And it's all about healing. It's all about healing and allowing ourselves to let that light in.
Yeah.
Even when we want to protect ourselves because it hurts and we're scared and there's a lot of pain involved in that. I mean, the father-son relationship, the mother-son relationship, mother-daughter, those seem to be the most stickiest when it comes to, having, whatever kind of painful experiences. And let me say, I've made multiple passes through the process on just that one relationship.
Yeah,
it takes what it takes.
It does.
But it's all about getting us to a place where we can be a conduit of love.
Right on. And that's the goal, man. Should positivity, love, and hope. Just to have a glimmer of hope in my life is keeping me alive and keeping me sober today. So I thank you for bringing your hope to the podcast. And dude, keep doing what you're doing, man. People check out Wellfi. Jesus, might as well say it right. Check out Wellfi. Find me on Twitter. I can point you in the right direction. And you're doing a great thing, dude. And there needs to be more humans like you, man. The peer support thing, I'm going to do my best to try to be involved in something like that here. Just thanks so much for coming on and spending this time with me, man. This is probably the longest podcast I've had, but I could sit here for 2 more hours and we could discuss. But thank you again, man. Just thank you very much.
I appreciate you so much. Keep doing this.
All right, buddy. Well, you have a great day, man. Best wishes to you and your family. And we will catch up and I'll let you know how the postcard goes, how I feel.
Yeah, I need to hear that.
All right, man. Take care, Chris.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.